Why does a single note from David Gilmour's guitar feel more powerful than 1,000 from anyone else's? This is not a rhetorical question. It is the central, nagging paradox that haunts the modern landscape of guitar music. In the pantheon of guitar gods, a strange and often misguided hierarchy persists. It's a temple built on the altar of speed, complexity, and sheer athletic prowess. We are told, implicitly and explicitly, through endless online tutorials, guitar magazine rankings, and the breathless commentary of so-called experts, that the greatest players are the ones who can cram the most notes into a single beat, who can navigate labyrinthine scales at impossible velocities, whose fingers move in a blur of superhuman dexterity. This is the age of the shredder, the virtuoso as an Olympic athlete, a digital warrior conquering a digital fretboard. And in this arena, David Gilmour seems at first glance like an anomaly, a ghost from a bygone era. He is not the fastest. He is not the most technically complex. His solos, when transcribed onto paper, often appear deceptively simple, relying heavily on the familiar, well-trodden shapes of the pentatonic and blues scales. So why, then, does his name command such universal reverence, cutting across genres and generations with an almost religious devotion? Why does a single soaring bend from his Fender Stratocaster carry more emotional weight, more narrative power, and more sheer, unadulterated soul than the collected works of so many of his more technically ostentatious peers? The answer is a brutal and necessary corrective to our modern obsession with velocity over substance. It is because David Gilmour is not merely a guitarist. He is a composer who happens to speak through 6 strings, an architect of soundscapes, and a master of the most elusive and vital element in all of music, emotion. To truly understand Gilmour's genius, we must first perform a necessary act of intellectual sanitation. We must dispense with the childish, video game-like notion that musical greatness is a quantifiable metric of notes per second. This is a fallacy born of competition, not of art. It reduces music to a sport and the musician to a mere technician. The guitarists who worship at this altar of speed often miss the fundamental point of music itself: to communicate, to evoke, to tell a story without words. Their solos become exercises in technical ego, a flurry of sound and fury signifying nothing more than the hours they spent practicing scales to a metronome. They are speaking a language fluently, but they have absolutely nothing to say. Gilmour, by contrast, is the ultimate musical storyteller. His playing is a testament to the profound power of restraint, phrasing, and above all, choice. Every note he plays is deliberate, every bend is calculated for maximum emotional impact, and every silence is as important as the notes that surround it. This is not the path of laziness or limited ability, as some ignorant critics might suggest. It is the path of a mature artist who understands that the true power of a statement lies not in its length, but in its meaning. While others were racing to the end of the fretboard, frantically trying to prove their worth, Gilmour was painstakingly searching for the single, perfect note that could encapsulate a universe of feeling. His arrival in Pink Floyd was itself a story of necessity, and the forging of a unique identity under the most immense and tragic pressure. Brought in initially in late 1967 to support, and eventually replace, the brilliant but tragically disintegrating Syd Barrett, Gilmour was not tasked with imitation. He was tasked with helping the band survive and find a new voice. Where Barrett's genius was a firework display of eccentric, whimsical, and fundamentally English psychedelia, a chaotic explosion of creative energy, Gilmour's contribution became the band's sonic bedrock. He provided the vast, atmospheric, and emotionally resonant foundation upon which the band's future masterpieces would be built. He developed a style that was less about frantic, nervous energy, and more about creating expansive sonic landscapes. His guitar became the narrator for Roger Waters' increasingly complex, philosophical, and cynical lyrical themes, providing the essential humanity and melodic soul that balanced the conceptual weight. This dynamic was crucial to the band's golden era. Gilmour's soaring lyrical solos acted as a cathartic release against the often bleak, paranoid, and introspective nature of albums like The Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, and The Wall. He was the perfect musical foil, the composer of feeling to Waters' composer of ideas. Waters gave the band its brain and its biting intellect. Gilmour gave the band its heart and its soul-stirring voice. Without that balance, Pink Floyd would have become an unlistenable lecture. Let's dissect the mechanics of his magic, for it is not some unknowable sorcery, but a combination of perfected techniques, deep theoretical understanding, and impeccable artistic taste. At the very core of his lead style are two fundamental elements that he mastered to a degree few have ever approached: his string bending and his vibrato. For many players, these are mere techniques, ornamental flourishes. For Gilmour, they are his primary language, the very mechanics of his vocal cords. His bends are not simply a way to reach a higher note. They are vocal-like cries, wails of anguish or shouts of triumph, pregnant with tension and cathartic release. He possesses an uncanny, almost supernatural control over pitch, often executing precise whole step, step and a half, or even two-step bends that push the string to its physical limit, yet never sound sharp or flat. They are always perfectly, musically in tune. Take the legendary 2.5-step bend in the outro solo for Another Brick in the Wall, Part 2. It's a moment of raw, screaming defiance that is both technically precise and emotionally shattering. This isn't just a physical gimmick. It's a profound compositional choice. The immense physical tension required to execute the bend mirrors the song's lyrical theme of rebellion and breaking free. His vibrato is equally distinctive and just as crucial. He eschews the frantic, nervous, bee-in-a-jar vibrato of many rock and metal players for something more soulful, more deliberate, and more human. A slow, wide, and perfectly controlled oscillation that allows each note to bloom and sing. It is this vibrato that gives his long, sustained notes their signature, heart-wrenching quality, making the guitar sound less like a plucked instrument and more like a cello or a human voice, holding a long, emotional note. The harmonic vocabulary he employs is, on the surface, deceptively straightforward. He is an undisputed master of the minor pentatonic and blues scales, the foundational building blocks of virtually all rock and blues guitar. But to say he just uses these scales is like saying Michelangelo just used a hammer and chisel. The genius, as always, lies not in the tool, but in its application. Gilmour possesses an innate and deeply sophisticated melodic sense, an ability to weave through these familiar patterns and highlight specific notes that resonate perfectly against the underlying chord changes. He thinks like a composer, not just a soloist. He is a master of playing the changes, targeting chord tones, the root, the third, the fifth, at critical moments to create a sense of resolution and melodic satisfaction. This is what gives his solos their lyrical, singable quality and separates him from the legions of players who simply rip through a single scale over an entire chord progression, oblivious to the rich harmonic landscape shifting beneath their fingers. Furthermore, he often masterfully introduces notes from outside the standard pentatonic box, frequently borrowing from the Dorian or Aeolian modes to add a touch of melodic color, sophistication, and emotional ambiguity. This prevents his blues-based phrasing from ever sounding generic or predictable. It's the musical equivalent of a great writer using a simple vocabulary, but choosing each word with such precision that it creates profound poetry. He also demonstrates a remarkable command of phrasing and the use of space. His solos breathe. He understands that the rests, the silences between phrases, are as important as the notes themselves. This creates a conversational call and response quality, allowing the listener to absorb the emotional impact of one musical statement before the next one is delivered. Of course, one cannot speak of David Gilmour without speaking of his tone. He is, without question, one of the great architects of guitar sound in the history of music. For him, tone is not merely an afterthought, a final polish on a finished part. It is an integral part of the composition itself, as fundamental as the notes being played. His sound is a living, breathing entity that shapes the emotional contour of the music. His primary tool was his iconic, heavily modified black Fender Stratocaster, a workhorse guitar that evolved with him throughout his career. But the guitar was just the beginning of a complex and meticulously crafted signal chain designed to create texture, depth, and atmosphere. This is where a direct, realistic approach is essential. Gilmour's sound is as much a product of his deep understanding of audio engineering and electronics as it is of his fingers. He was a pioneer in using effects not as flashy novelties or sonic crutches, but as genuine compositional tools. His entire rig was a laboratory of sound, a palette of sonic colors from which he painted his masterpieces. The searing, violin-like sustain that defines his most iconic solos was often born from the perfect marriage of a specific pedal driving a specific amplifier. He brilliantly paired a Dallas Arbiter fuzz face or, more famously, an Electro-Harmonix Big Muff Pi pedal with the pristine, high-headroom clean channel of a high-watt DR103 amplifier. The Big Muff in particular, with its scooped mid-range and immense woolly gain, is the key to the monumental wall of sound tone of solos like Comfortably Numb and Sorrow. But crucially, Gilmour understood that raw power was not enough. He sculpted this sound with a masterful use of delay. He was an early and devoted user of the Binson EchoRec, a magnetic drum echo unit that produced warmer, more rhythmic, and more complex delays than the tape echoes of the time. The EchoRec wasn't just used to create a simple repeat. Its multi-head design allowed for swirling, regenerative, almost reverberant echoes that became a textural element in their own right. This is the secret to the three-dimensional psychedelic quality of his playing on tracks like Time and the epic Echoes. He treated delay as an instrument in its own right, carefully timing the repeats to the song's tempo to create rhythmic complexity and a sense of vast, cavernous space. His use of the delay on Run Like Hell, with its dotted eighth note rhythm, created the song's signature galloping pulse and became one of the most iconic uses of the effect in history. Modulation effects were also central to his sonic palette, allowing him to add movement and shimmer to his sound. The liquid underwater textures of Breathe and Us and Them were created with a Univibe pedal, an effect forever associated with Jimi Hendrix, but arguably perfected as a textural tool by Gilmour. The slow, sweeping sound of an MXR Phase 90 became integral to the melancholic atmosphere of the Wish You Were Here album, particularly on Shine On You Crazy Diamond and Have a Cigar. Later, he would incorporate flangers like the Electric Mistress to add a metallic, jet plane-like whoosh to his tone, a sound that defined much of the guitar work on The Wall and Animals. Gilmour's genius was in his ability to blend these effects seamlessly, creating a sound that was simultaneously huge and detailed, powerful and ethereal. He understood that tone was an emotional variable. A clean, compressed tone with a touch of chorus could evoke a sense of melancholic beauty and nostalgia, while a fuzz pedal cranked into an overdriven amp could unleash a torrent of rage, despair, or righteous fury. His command over this sonic arsenal allowed him to paint with a complete emotional spectrum, making the guitar not just an instrument, but the voice of the album's entire mood. The legions of Gilmourish fans who spend fortunes meticulously recreating his pedal boards are a testament to this fact. They recognize that his tone is so unique and so integral to the music that it has become an object of study in itself. Ultimately, however, all discussions of technique, theory, and technology must lead back to a single defining example, the moment that serves as the apotheosis of his entire musical philosophy, the two solos in Comfortably Numb. They are, quite simply, a masterclass in guitar composition and emotional narrative, arguably the most perfectly constructed and emotionally resonant guitar solos in the history of rock music. The first solo, shorter and played over the song's major key chorus progression, is a model of melodic construction and sublime restraint. It feels structured, almost like a vocal melody, perfectly capturing the Doctor's detached, clinical perspective in the song's narrative. It is beautiful, precise and contained, a piece of melodic perfection that could stand alone as its own composition. It sets the stage, a moment of deceptive calm before the storm. The final solo, however, is a complete primal scream. Erupting over the darker, minor key verse progression, it is an explosion of raw, untethered emotion. It represents the breaking of the dam, the release of the protagonist's lifetime of pent-up pain, frustration, isolation, and despair. The construction of this final solo is a lesson in dramatic tension and release that rivals any piece of classical music. It starts low on the neck and slow in tempo, with long, mournful bends and a masterful use of space, allowing the listener to absorb the weight of each carefully chosen phrase. As the progression repeats, Gilmour gradually builds the intensity, introducing faster flurries of notes and pushing his bends higher and higher into the upper register. The phrasing is a perfect blend of raw blues vocabulary and pure, transcendent melodic instinct. He is not just running scales, he is telling a story of suffering and fighting back. By the solo's climax, he has ascended to the highest register of the guitar, his notes screaming into the stratosphere, drenched in the glorious sustain of the big muff and the swirling echoes of his delay, before the song finally fades, leaving the listener emotionally exhausted and utterly captivated. It is more than a guitar solo. It is a 2-minute symphony of despair and catharsis. It is the perfect synthesis of everything that makes him great: impeccable note choice, vocal-like phrasing, masterful control of tone and effects, and an unparalleled ability to channel pure, unadulterated human emotion directly through a piece of wood and wire. In an era that increasingly celebrates the superficial, the technical, and the inhuman, David Gilmour stands as a colossal monument to depth and substance. He reminds us, with every perfectly placed note, that the goal of a musician should not be to impress, but to move. He is a brutal rebuke to the legion of soulless technicians and social media guitarists who can play everything but feel nothing, who mistake complexity for artistry. His legacy is not written in the number of notes he played, but in the indelible emotional mark he left on millions of listeners, in the goosebumps that still rise during the first notes of Shine On, in the lump that forms in the throat during the climax of Comfortably Numb. His greatness lies in his profound understanding that a guitar, in the right hands, can be more than an instrument. It can be a voice for the voiceless, a conduit for the deepest and most complex of human emotions, a tool to build cathedrals of sound. He proved, beyond any doubt, that true, lasting power lies not in how fast you can play, but in how deeply you can make someone feel. And that, in the end, is why a single, solitary note from David Gilmour's guitar will forever echo with more meaning, more truth, and more soul than 1,000 notes from almost anyone else.